Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell had seen many cases in her 20 years with the Royal Protection Unit, but nothing quite like this. The manila folder on her desk contained documents that had been sealed for over 2 years, marked with the highest classification levels. The case of Queen Camilla's mysterious illness had officially been closed, attributed to natural causes and stress from her royal duties. Sarah picked up the photograph from the file. It showed the Queen Consort at a charity gala just 3 days before she collapsed at Buckingham Palace. In the image, Camilla appeared radiant and healthy, her smile genuine as she spoke with guests. The contrast with what happened next was shocking. The official report stated that Camilla had suffered from severe food poisoning, likely from contaminated seafood served at a private dinner. She had been rushed to King Edward VII Hospital in the early hours of a Tuesday morning, her condition critical. For 48 hours, the nation held its breath as medical teams worked to save her life. When she finally recovered, the palace released a statement thanking the medical staff and requesting privacy for the royal family. But now, 2 years later, new evidence had emerged that changed everything. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the Queen's personal physician, had approached Sarah through unofficial channels. The elderly doctor was retiring and felt compelled to speak about inconsistencies she had noticed during Camilla's treatment. These concerns had been dismissed at the time due to the chaos and urgency of the situation. Sarah opened her notebook and reviewed Dr. Harper's statement. The doctor had mentioned unusual symptoms that didn't match typical food poisoning. Camilla's blood work showed traces of compounds that were not found in the other dinner guests who ate the same meal. Most troubling was the discovery of a rare plant toxin in her system, something that would never occur naturally in any food served at the palace. The detective walked to the window of her office, looking out at the London streets below. Rain was beginning to fall, creating patterns on the glass that reminded her of the complex web of this case. She had requested permission to reopen the investigation 3 times over the past month. Each request had been denied by her superiors, who insisted that the matter was settled. Everything changed when James Crawford, a former palace kitchen staff member, contacted the police. James had worked in the royal kitchens for 15 years and had been present during the dinner that allegedly caused Camilla's illness. He claimed to have witnessed something suspicious that night, something he had been too frightened to report at the time. Sarah had interviewed James the previous week in a small cafe far from the palace. The man was nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder as he spoke. He explained that on the night in question he had seen someone unauthorized in the private dining room area. This person was not part of the regular serving staff and appeared to be handling the Queen's personal wine glass. James described the individual as wearing the standard palace uniform. But something felt wrong. The person moved differently, more purposefully than the usual staff. When James tried to approach and offer assistance, the individual quickly left the area. James had thought it strange, but assumed it was perhaps a new staff member he hadn't met. The breakthrough came when James provided security footage he had secretly copied before leaving his job. The footage showed a figure in palace uniform, but facial recognition software revealed something shocking. The person was Marcus Whitfield, a former palace employee who had been dismissed 6 months before the incident for suspected theft. Sarah studied Marcus's employment file. He had worked as an assistant to the palace event coordinator and had intimate knowledge of royal dining protocols. His dismissal had been quiet, without criminal charges, as the palace preferred to handle such matters internally. However, Marcus had been bitter about his termination and had made several threats against royal staff members. The detective's phone buzzed with a text message from her supervisor. The message was brief but clear. "Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring all files related to the Camilla case." Sarah knew this meant her investigation had reached higher levels of attention. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. She returned to her desk and opened Marcus Whitfield's personal file. After leaving the palace, he had struggled to find steady employment. His references from the royal household were deliberately vague, making it difficult for him to secure similar positions elsewhere. Financial records showed he had accumulated significant debt and had been evicted from his apartment just weeks before. Camilla's poisoning. Most concerning were the social media posts Sarah discovered on Marcus's accounts. Though he used pseudonyms, digital forensics had traced the accounts back to him. The posts showed increasing anger toward the royal family, particularly Queen Camilla. He had written extensively about perceived injustices and had shared conspiracy theories about the monarchy. Sarah printed out the most relevant social media posts and added them to her evidence file. One post, made just days before the incident, was particularly chilling. Marcus had written about how some people get what they deserve and mentioned that actions have consequences for everyone, even those who think they're untouchable. The detective checked the time and realized she had been working late into the evening again. Her dedication to this case was consuming her thoughts, but she felt compelled to pursue the truth. The idea that someone had attempted to harm the queen consort and had nearly succeeded was deeply troubling. As she gathered her files to leave the office, Sarah noticed a detail she had previously overlooked. In the security footage, Marcus was carrying a small vial that he discreetly emptied into Camilla's wineglass. The action was quick and practiced, suggesting this was not an impulsive decision but a carefully planned attack. Tomorrow's meeting would determine whether she could continue her investigation or if political pressures would force the case to remain closed. Sarah knew that pursuing this case could have serious implications for her career, but she also knew that justice demanded the truth be revealed. She locked her files in the secure cabinet and headed home, unaware that her investigation had already attracted the attention of people who would do anything to keep the truth buried. The game was far more dangerous than she realized, and the stakes were higher than she could imagine. Sarah arrived at the Scotland Yard headquarters early the next morning, her coffee growing cold as she rehearsed her presentation. The meeting room on the 7th floor was reserved for the most sensitive cases, its windows tinted and walls designed to prevent electronic surveillance. She knew today would determine the future of her investigation. Commander Robert Hayes entered the room precisely at 9 o'clock, followed by Deputy Assistant Commissioner Victoria Mills and a man Sarah didn't recognize. The stranger wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone from the intelligence services. No introductions were made regarding his identity. Sarah presented her findings methodically, laying out the evidence piece by piece. She showed the security footage, Dr. Harper's medical concerns, and the social media posts from Marcus Whitfield. The room remained silent as she explained the timeline and the inconsistencies in the original investigation. When she finished, Commander Hayes leaned back in his chair. His expression was unreadable, a skill perfected through decades of handling politically sensitive cases. The unnamed man whispered something to Deputy Assistant Commissioner Mills, who nodded gravely. Commander Hayes finally spoke. "Detective Inspector Mitchell, your work has been thorough, but you must understand the delicate nature of this situation. The royal family has endured enough scrutiny over the past few years. Reopening this case could cause significant embarrassment and potentially destabilize public confidence in the monarchy." Sarah had expected this response, but she pressed forward. "Sir, with respect, if someone attempted to murder the queen consort, that person is still free and could strike again. We cannot prioritize politics over justice and public safety." The unnamed man leaned forward and spoke for the first time. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable warning. "Detective Inspector, you should consider that there might be aspects of this case that extend beyond your current understanding. Sometimes the greater good requires certain truths to remain hidden." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The implication was clear, but she had come too far to back down now. "Are you suggesting that we cover up an attempted murder because it's politically inconvenient?" Deputy Assistant Commissioner Mills intervened before the conversation could escalate further. "We're not suggesting a cover-up, Inspector. We're asking you to consider whether pursuing this investigation serves the public interest. The Queen Consort recovered fully, and the suspect you've identified has since disappeared." This was news to Sarah. She had planned to locate and interview Marcus Whitfield as her next step. "Disappeared? When? Why wasn't I informed?" Commander Hayes opened a thin file and slid a photograph across the table. It showed Marcus Whitfield's passport being stamped at Heathrow Airport. He left the country 6 months ago on a flight to Thailand. His current whereabouts are unknown. Sarah studied the photograph carefully. Something about it seemed staged, too convenient. Has anyone attempted to locate him? Interpol could issue a warrant. The unnamed man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Inspector, I think you're missing the larger picture here. Mr. Whitfield is no longer a concern. Sometimes problems resolve themselves in ways that don't require official action. The implication sent a chill through the room. Sarah realized she might be dealing with forces far beyond a simple criminal investigation. The unnamed man's presence and cryptic comments suggested involvement from intelligence agencies. Possibly MI5 or MI6. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Mills tried to lighten the atmosphere. Inspector Mitchell, your work has been exemplary. However, we've decided to transfer you to a new assignment that better suits your investigative skills. The counterterrorism unit has requested your expertise for an urgent case. Sarah recognized this for what it was, a reassignment designed to remove her from the Camilla case. The offer was generous and would advance her career, but it felt like a bribe wrapped in professional opportunity. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. The text was from Dr. Harper. They know I spoke to you. Meet me at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, morgue level, 30 minutes. Come alone and bring everything. Sarah's blood ran cold. She looked up to find the unnamed man watching her intently, as if he could read the message from across the table. His slight nod confirmed her worst fears. Dr. Harper was in danger because of their cooperation. She stood abruptly, gathering her files. I need to follow up on a lead. We can discuss my reassignment later. Commander Hayes's voice was sharp. Inspector, this meeting isn't concluded. Your reassignment begins immediately. Sarah paused at the door, weighing her options. She could comply with orders and abandon the investigation, ensuring her career remained secure. Or she could pursue the truth, knowing it would likely end her time with the police force. With respect, sir, I have urgent police business to attend to. A citizen may be in immediate danger. She left the room without waiting for permission, knowing she had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt endless, and she found herself checking every shadow for potential threats. During the drive to St. Bartholomew's Hospital, Sarah's mind raced through the implications of the meeting. The unnamed man's presence indicated this case had attracted attention from the highest levels of government. His comments about problems resolving themselves suggested that Marcus Whitfield might not have disappeared voluntarily. She parked several blocks from the hospital and approached on foot, taking a circuitous route to ensure she wasn't being followed. The morgue level was accessed through a service entrance that Dr. Harper had described in their previous conversations. Dr. Harper was waiting in the autopsy room, her usually composed demeanor replaced by obvious fear. The elderly physician clutched a small leather briefcase and kept glancing toward the door. Inspector Mitchell, thank God you came. I received a call this morning warning me to cease all contact with police regarding the Camilla case. The caller knew details about my family that he shouldn't have known. Sarah felt her anger rising. Threatening witnesses was a clear sign that powerful people wanted this investigation stopped. Dr. Harper, you're under police protection now. Tell me what you know. The doctor opened her briefcase and removed several medical files. These are copies of test results I ran privately after the Queen's recovery. The toxin levels were much higher than I initially reported. Someone gave her enough poison to kill 3 people. The only reason she survived was her strong constitution and the quick medical response. Sarah examined the medical documents, noting the official dates and signature stamps. These were legitimate test results that painted a picture of attempted murder, not accidental food poisoning. Dr. Harper continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's something else. The antidote used to save her life. It was prepared in advance. Someone in the medical team knew what poison would be used and had the specific treatment ready. This revelation changed everything. The attempted murder was not just premeditated but had involved collaboration from someone within the medical staff. The conspiracy reached deeper into the royal household than Sarah had imagined. Who had access to prepare the antidote? Sarah asked. Dr. Harper's hands shook as she revealed the final document. Only 3 people could have authorized and prepared that specific treatment. One of them is dead, one has disappeared, and the third person is still working at the palace. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside made both women freeze. Dr. Harper quickly returned the documents to her briefcase and handed it to Sarah. Take these. I'm leaving London tonight. Be very careful who you trust, Inspector. This conspiracy goes higher than you can imagine. Sarah accepted the briefcase, knowing she was now carrying evidence that made her a target. The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer, and she realized their meeting had been discovered. Sarah quickly helped Dr. Harper escape through a service exit while the footsteps approached the morgue. They separated in the hospital parking garage, with Dr. Harper heading toward a taxi while Sarah returned to her car through a different route. The briefcase felt heavy in her hands, weighted with secrets that could shake the monarchy. Back at her apartment, Sarah secured the medical files and began analyzing the new evidence. The name on the antidote preparation order was Dr. Michael Thornton, currently serving as the deputy royal physician. According to the documents, he had prepared the specific antidote 18 hours before Camilla showed any symptoms of poisoning. Sarah researched Dr. Thornton's background and discovered an interesting connection. He had been recommended for his position by Marcus Whitfield during Whitfield's time as palace event coordinator. The 2 men had known each other since university, where they had been members of the same exclusive social club. Her laptop chimed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. The message contained a single line: check the university club membership records. Look for the third name. The message deleted itself after she read it, leaving no trace of its origin. Sarah drove to Oxford University, where both Dr. Thornton and Marcus Whitfield had studied. The university's alumni office was initially reluctant to provide membership records for private clubs, but Sarah's police credentials and a carefully worded warrant request opened the necessary doors. The Pegasus Society was an exclusive club that had existed at Oxford for over a century. Its membership was limited to students from wealthy families, and joining required sponsorship from current members. Sarah found the records from 25 years ago. When both Thornton and Whitfield were students, the third member of their group was a name that made Sarah's blood run cold: David Sterling. Now serving as private secretary to the king, Sterling was one of the most powerful non-royal figures in the palace hierarchy, responsible for managing the monarch's daily schedule and controlling access to the royal family. Sarah photographed the relevant pages and left Oxford with a growing understanding of the conspiracy's scope. 3 university friends had positioned themselves within the royal household, 2 in medical roles and 1 in administration. Their access and knowledge would have made the poisoning plot not only possible but relatively simple to execute. Her phone rang as she drove back to London. The caller ID showed her supervisor's number, but she hesitated before answering. Any communication with Scotland Yard could now be monitored and used against her. She let the call go to voicemail and instead drove to a secure location, a small office building where her friend Tony worked as a private investigator. Tony was a former police detective who had left the force after refusing to participate in a politically motivated cover-up years earlier. Tony listened carefully as Sarah explained the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and whistled softly. Sarah, you've stumbled into something massive. These aren't just random criminals. This is a coordinated effort involving people at the highest levels of government and the royal household. You need to decide how far you're willing to go. Sarah knew Tony was right, but she couldn't abandon the investigation now. I need help identifying who's been watching me and how to safely gather more evidence. Tony agreed to assist, but he warned her about the dangers. These people have resources we can't imagine. They can monitor communications, track movements, and make problems disappear. If you continue this investigation, you need to assume everyone is potentially compromised. They developed a plan using old-fashioned surveillance techniques that would be harder to detect electronically. Sarah would continue her official duties while Tony conducted covert research into the three suspects, current activities and connections over the next week. Tony's investigation revealed disturbing patterns. Dr. Thornton had made several suspicious financial transactions in the months leading up to Camilla's poisoning. Large cash withdrawals and deposits suggested he was being paid for services. Beyond his medical duties, David Sterling's activities were even more concerning. Tony discovered that Sterling had been meeting regularly with representatives from foreign governments, particularly those with contentious relationships with the British monarchy. These meetings were not recorded in any official palace schedules. The most shocking discovery came from Marcus Whitfield's supposed disappearance. Tony's contacts in airport security revealed that while Whitfield's passport had indeed been stamped at Heathrow, there was no record of him actually boarding the flight to Thailand. The passport stamp was genuine, but it appeared Whitfield had never left the country. Sarah met Tony in a crowded London pub to receive his report. The ambient noise would make electronic surveillance difficult, and the public setting provided some protection against more direct threats. Marcus Whitfield is still in London, Tony revealed quietly. He's been living under an assumed name in a safe house in East London. Someone with significant resources is protecting him. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Whitfield hadn't disappeared to avoid prosecution. He had been hidden to prevent him from revealing the full scope of the conspiracy. Tony continued his briefing. I managed to get surveillance photos of the safe house. Whitfield is being guarded by people who are definitely not ordinary criminals. These are professionals, possibly former military or intelligence operatives. The photographs showed the building and several individuals whose bearing suggested extensive training in security and surveillance. Sarah realized that Whitfield was either being protected because he possessed valuable information or held captive to ensure his silence. There's more, Tony said, sliding another photograph across the table. Dr. Thornton visited the safe house yesterday. The meeting lasted 3 hours. This confirmed that the conspiracy was still active. Rather than disbanding after the failed assassination attempt, the group was continuing to operate and coordinate their activities. Sarah studied the photographs carefully, memorizing faces and details that might prove important later. She noticed that one of the guards looked familiar, and after a moment she realized where she had seen him before. He was in the background of palace security footage from the night of Camilla's poisoning. Tony, I need you to find out everything you can about this guard. He might be the connection between the palace security and this conspiracy. As they prepared to leave the pub, Tony grabbed Sarah's arm. There's something else you need to know. Word on the street is that someone has put a price on your head. Nothing official, but the kind of whisper that gets freelancers interested in earning easy money. Sarah felt her world shift. She was no longer just investigating a case, she was fighting for her life. The people behind this conspiracy had decided she knew too much and posed too great a threat to their operations. They left the pub, separately, with plans to communicate only through secure channels Tony had established. Sarah drove home through a circuitous route, checking for surveillance and varying her speed and direction to detect anyone following her. Her apartment building seemed normal as she approached, but training and instinct warned her something was wrong. The usual evening sounds were absent, and she noticed a van parked across the street that hadn't been there that morning. Rather than entering her building, Sarah continued driving and parked several blocks away. She approached her apartment on foot, using alleys and side streets to remain hidden. From a building across the street, she could observe her apartment windows and the building entrance. After 30 minutes of observation, she saw movement in her apartment. Figures with flashlights were systematically searching her rooms, looking for the evidence she had hidden. Professional burglars would have been faster and less thorough. These were intelligence operatives conducting a methodical investigation. Sarah realized she could never return to her apartment safely. Everything she had worked for in her career, her personal belongings, and her normal life were now lost. The conspiracy had escalated from hiding. Evidenced her actively hunting the investigator, she made her way back to her car and drove to a safe location. Tony had identified a small bed and breakfast run by one of his trusted contacts. As she checked in under an assumed name, Sarah wondered how many other investigators had gotten too close to the truth and simply disappeared. The next phase of her investigation would require going underground completely, abandoning her official police role and pursuing the truth as a fugitive from the very system she had sworn to serve. Sarah spent her first night as a fugitive in the small bed and breakfast, constantly listening for sounds that might indicate she had been discovered. The elderly proprietor, Mrs. Chun, asked no questions about her late arrival or cash payment, suggesting she was experienced with guests who needed discretion. Early the next morning, Tony arrived with supplies and disturbing news. Sarah's official disappearance had been reported to Scotland Yard with a cover story, claiming she had suffered a mental breakdown and posed a danger to herself and others. An official manhunt was being organized under the guise of a welfare check. "They're being clever," Tony explained over breakfast. "By claiming you're mentally unstable, they discredit anything you might reveal about the conspiracy. Anyone you contact will be told you're delusional and dangerous." Sarah understood the brilliance of the strategy. The same people who had tried to murder the queen consort were now systematically destroying her credibility and isolating her from potential allies. Tony handed her a package containing new identity documents, prepaid mobile phones, and cash. "These will work for a few days, but we need to resolve this quickly. Every hour you're missing makes their story more believable." Sarah studied the fake identification cards. The name Emma Thompson would have to become her new identity while she worked to expose the truth. The irony of sharing a name with the famous actress was not lost on her, but it provided good cover. People would remember the name but not her face. Their plan was ambitious but necessary. While Sarah remained hidden, Tony would attempt to make contact with Marcus Whitfield at the East London safe house. If they could convince Whitfield to testify about the conspiracy, his inside knowledge might be enough to bring down the entire operation. Sarah spent the day studying the case files, looking for any details she might have missed. The medical records Dr. Harper had provided contained timestamps that revealed important information about the poison's administration and the antidote's preparation. According to the medical data, the poison had been administered approximately 30 minutes before Camilla began showing symptoms. This timeline matched the security footage of Marcus Whitfield tampering with her wine glass. However, the antidote preparation had begun nearly 2 hours before the poisoning, indicating the medical team knew exactly when the attack would occur. This level of coordination suggested the conspiracy involved more people than just the 3 university friends. Someone else had been providing logistical support and ensuring all elements of the plot were synchronized perfectly. Sarah's analysis was interrupted by an urgent phone call from Tony. His voice was tense and he spoke quickly. "Emma, I'm at the safe house location. There's been a development. Whitfield is dead." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Their primary witness and potential ally had been eliminated, probably to prevent him from revealing more details about the conspiracy. Tony continued his report from the scene. "It's been made to look like suicide, but there are signs of a struggle. Professional work, but not perfect. I'm taking photographs before the police arrive." Sarah realized the conspiracy was entering a new phase. Rather than simply hiding evidence, the perpetrators were now eliminating witnesses. Dr. Harper's decision to leave London might have saved her life. "Tony, get out of there immediately. If they killed Whitfield, you could be next." She could hear sirens approaching in the background of Tony's call. He ended the conversation abruptly, and Sarah was left alone with the knowledge that their investigation had just become significantly more dangerous. Over the next few hours, Sarah monitored news reports about Whitfield's death. The official story described a troubled former palace employee who had been struggling with depression and financial difficulties. His apparent suicide was treated as a tragic but predictable outcome for someone who had fallen from grace. The media narrative was too neat and arrived too quickly. Within hours of the body's discovery, Reporters had detailed background information about Whitfield's dismissal from the palace and his subsequent struggles. This suggested someone had prepared the cover story in advance, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. Sarah's secure phone buzzed with a text message. From an unknown number, St. Paul's Cathedral, morning service tomorrow. Come alone. Wear blue scarf. Friends of Dr. Harper. The message provided hope that other people were working to expose the truth. Dr. Harper had apparently connected with Elias before leaving London. People who might be able to continue the investigation. Sarah spent the evening preparing for the meeting, considering various scenarios and potential threats. The choice of St. Paul's Cathedral was smart, a public location with multiple exits and enough crowd activity to make surveillance difficult. She arrived at the cathedral 30 minutes early, wearing the requested blue scarf and carrying a guidebook to blend in with tourists. The morning service was well attended, providing good cover for a clandestine meeting. During the service, a middle-aged woman took the seat beside Sarah. She appeared to be following the religious ceremony but whispered quietly during hymns when their voices would be masked by the surrounding singing. I'm Margaret Bowles, Dr. Harper's research assistant, the woman whispered. She asked me to find you before she left the country. There's something you need to know about David Sterling. Sarah listened intently as Margaret revealed information that cast the entire conspiracy in a new light. Sterling's position as private secretary to the king gave him unprecedented access to royal schedules and security arrangements. More importantly, he had been using his position to sell information to foreign intelligence services for several years. The poisoning attempt wasn't about killing the queen consort, Margaret whispered. It was about creating a crisis that would allow Sterling to manipulate the king's decisions. During the emergency, Sterling gained temporary authority over communication between the king and government officials. This revelation explained the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy. Sterling wasn't just participating in an assassination attempt, he was orchestrating a coup that would give him indirect control over the monarchy's political influence. Margaret continued her briefing. During the next hymn, Dr. Harper discovered that Sterling has been planning this for years. The poisoning was just the first step in a larger plan to destabilize the royal family and eventually force the king to abdicate. Sarah realized the full scope of what they were fighting against. This wasn't a simple criminal conspiracy, but a treasonous plot that threatened the constitutional foundation of the British government. As the service concluded, Margaret handed Sarah a small envelope. These are copies of Sterling's communications with foreign contacts. Dr. Harper managed to obtain them before she left. Be very careful. Sterling has people throughout the government and police force. Sarah accepted the envelope, understanding that she now possessed evidence of treason at the highest levels of the royal household. The documents could bring down Sterling and his conspirators, but they also made her the most wanted person in the conspiracy's effort to maintain secrecy. Margaret disappeared into the crowd of departing worshippers, leaving Sarah alone with evidence that could either save the monarchy or get her killed. She knew that her next actions would determine not just her own fate but possibly the future of the British crown. The walk back to her temporary accommodation felt longer than usual, as Sarah became acutely aware of every person who looked at her twice or seemed to follow the same route. The weight of the envelope in her pocket was matched by the weight of responsibility she now carried. Back at the bed and breakfast, Sarah opened the envelope to find detailed financial records, encrypted communications, and meeting schedules that painted a clear picture of Sterling's treasonous activities. The evidence was comprehensive and damaging, but she needed a way to present it to authorities who weren't already compromised. Her secure phone rang with a call from Tony. His voice was shaken as he delivered more devastating news. Sarah, there's been another development. Dr. Thornton was found dead this morning in his office at the palace. Another apparent suicide, but the timing is too convenient. The conspiracy was eliminating its members to prevent further exposure. Sterling was cutting loose ends and removing anyone who could testify against him. Sarah realized she might be the only person left alive who could prove the full extent of the treasonous plot. The game had changed again, and the stakes had risen beyond anything she had imagined. She was no longer just investigating a crime, she was fighting to prevent the complete corruption of the British monarchy. The deaths of both Whitfield and Dr. Thornton within 24 hours confirmed Sarah's worst fears about the conspiracy's reach and ruthlessness. David Sterling was systematically eliminating anyone who could expose his treasonous activities, and she knew she would be next on his list. Sarah studied the financial documents Margaret had provided, discovering a complex web of offshore accounts and cryptocurrency transactions. Sterling had been receiving substantial payments from foreign intelligence services, particularly from countries that opposed British foreign policy. The amounts were staggering millions of pounds. Transferred over several years, the encrypted communications revealed Sterling's long-term plan in disturbing detail. The poisoning of Queen Camilla was meant to create a medical emergency that would require the king to delegate temporary authority to his private secretary. During this period, Sterling would have controlled all communication between the monarch and government officials, effectively giving him veto power over royal decisions. More chilling was Sterling's ultimate goal: to gradually poison the king himself, making it appear as though the stress of his wife's near-death experience had caused a decline in his health. The plan called for the king to abdicate due to medical concerns, triggering a constitutional crisis that Sterling could manipulate to his advantage. Sarah realized that Queen Camilla's survival had disrupted the conspiracy's timeline but hadn't ended their ambitions. Sterling was now moving to eliminate witnesses and evidence while developing a new approach. To achieve his goals, her secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from Tony. "Sterling knows about our investigation. My office was searched last night. We need to move fast." The net was closing around them, and Sarah knew they had only a short window to expose the truth before Sterling's resources overwhelmed their amateur investigation. She needed to find someone in authority who wasn't compromised by the conspiracy. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chun, the bed and breakfast proprietor, revealed during their morning conversation that she had a grandson who worked in the cabinet office. The young man, David Chun, was a senior civil servant responsible for monitoring threats to national security. "My grandson is a good boy," Mrs. Chun explained in her careful English. "He doesn't like corruption or people who betray their country. Maybe he can help you." Sarah was initially hesitant to involve another person, knowing the danger it would bring to both David Chun and his grandmother. However, the evidence she possessed was too important to remain hidden, and she needed someone with official authority to present it properly. Mrs. Chun arranged a meeting at her restaurant in Chinatown, a location that would provide good cover and multiple escape routes. David Chun arrived precisely on time, a serious young man who listened intently as Sarah presented her evidence. "This is extraordinary," David said after reviewing the documents. "If authentic, this represents the most serious threat to national security we've faced in decades. Sterling has been in position to influence royal decisions for years." Sarah provided additional context about the poisoning attempt and the subsequent murders of the conspirators. David took careful notes and photographed key documents. Understanding the significance of what she was revealing, "I can present this to the National Security Council, but I'll need more than copies," David explained. "We need original documents or testimony from surviving witnesses." Sarah explained that Dr. Harper had fled the country and Margaret Bowles had gone into hiding. The only remaining evidence was what she had collected, plus whatever digital forensics might recover from Sterling's communications. David considered the options carefully. "There's one possibility. The palace maintains its own security archive, separate from government systems. If we could access Sterling's office computer directly, we might find evidence he hasn't had time to destroy." The plan was audacious and extremely dangerous. Sarah would need to infiltrate Buckingham Palace, access Sterling's private office, and copy his computer files without being detected. David would provide technical support and ensure the evidence reached the proper authorities. Sarah spent the next day studying palace security procedures and planning her infiltration. Her years with the Royal Protection Unit gave her intimate knowledge of guard rotations, surveillance systems, and security protocols. She knew the palace better than almost anyone outside the royal household. The key was timing. Sterling typically worked late into the evening, but Thursday nights he attended regular meetings with foreign diplomatic contacts at a private club in Mayfair. This would give Sarah approximately 3 hours to complete her mission. Tony provided essential equipment: electronic lockpicks, surveillance detection devices, and a high-capacity data storage device that could copy Sterling's entire computer system in minutes. The tools were military-grade and virtually undetectable by standard palace security systems. Thursday evening arrived with typical London rain, providing additional cover for Sarah's infiltration. She approached the palace through the staff entrance, using credentials David Chun had obtained through his government connections. The fake identity would pass casual inspection, but wouldn't survive detailed scrutiny. Palace security was extensive but predictable. Sarah's knowledge of guard rotations allowed her to move through service corridors and back stairways without encountering patrols. The private secretary's office was located in the administrative wing, away from the royal family's private quarters. Sterling's office door was protected by an electronic lock that Tony's equipment bypassed in less than 30 seconds. The office was exactly as Sarah had imagined: elegant, organized, and filled with evidence of Sterling's access to the most sensitive royal information. His computer was password protected, but David Chun had provided software that could break most encryption systems. Sarah connected the data storage device and began copying Sterling's files while monitoring the hallway for approaching security guards. The computer contained thousands of documents, including correspondence with foreign agents, financial records of payments received, and detailed plans for future operations against the royal family. Most damaging were recordings of conversations Sterling had secretly made with the king, capturing private discussions about government policy and international relations. Sarah's surveillance equipment detected movement in the hallway outside. Guards were conducting their routine patrol earlier than expected, threatening to discover her before the data copying was complete. She had to choose between escaping with partial evidence or risking capture to obtain the complete files. She chose to remain, hiding behind Sterling's desk while the guards checked the office door. The lock showed no signs of tampering, and the guards moved on without entering. Sarah's heart pounded as she waited for the data transfer to complete. The copying finished just as her surveillance equipment detected Sterling's return to the palace. He was arriving nearly an hour earlier than his usual schedule, possibly alerted by associates that his security had been compromised. Sarah gathered her equipment and prepared to leave through a service exit. But the sound of Sterling's voice in the corridor made her freeze. He was speaking angrily on his phone, describing how the situation needed to be resolved permanently and mentioning that all loose ends would be tied up tonight. She realized that Sterling knew about her investigation and was planning to eliminate her before she could present the evidence to authorities. Her infiltration of his office had been detected, and he was now mobilizing resources to hunt her down. Sarah escaped through a window that led to the palace gardens, using her knowledge of the grounds to evade security cameras and guard positions. The rain provided cover, but she knew Sterling's people would soon organize a systematic search of the surrounding area. As she made her way through the dark London streets, Sarah understood that the next few hours would determine whether the truth about the conspiracy would ever be revealed. Sterling had vast resources and government connections, but she now possessed evidence that could destroy his treasonous network. The final confrontation between truth and conspiracy was about to begin, and the future of the British monarchy hung in the balance. Sarah had the evidence needed to expose Sterling, but first she had to survive long enough to present it to people who could act on the information. Her phone buzzed with a message from David Chun: safe house compromised. Sterling's people found Tony. Meet at emergency location. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized her friend and ally had been captured by the conspiracy. The stakes had risen again, and now she was fighting not just for justice but for the lives of everyone who had helped her uncover the truth. Sarah arrived at the emergency meeting location, 24-hour internet cafe in East London, to find David Chun waiting with grim news. Tony had been taken from his office by men claiming to be government security officers. His current whereabouts were unknown, but David's intelligence contacts suggested he was being held at a private facility used for unofficial interrogations. "Sterling is moving faster than we anticipated," David explained quietly. "He's activated sleeper assets throughout the government and is using emergency powers to justify his actions. We have perhaps 12 hours before he consolidates enough control to make our evidence irrelevant." Sarah connected the data storage device to one of the cafe computers and began uploading Sterling's files to a secure server David had established. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records showing millions in foreign payments, recorded conversations revealing Sterling's manipulation of royal decisions, and detailed plans for further attacks on the monarchy. Most damaging was Sterling's correspondence with foreign intelligence services, particularly a series of messages discussing plans to remove the British monarchy as an obstacle to regional stability. The conspiracy wasn't just about personal gain, it was part of a broader international effort to destabilize Britain's constitutional system. David reviewed the evidence with growing alarm. "This is worse than we thought. Sterling isn't just a corrupt official, he's been running a foreign intelligence operation from inside Buckingham Palace." The poisoning attempt was just one element of a comprehensive plan to destroy the royal family's credibility and influence. As they worked to organize the evidence, Sarah's surveillance equipment detected multiple vehicles surrounding the cafe. Sterling's security team had located them and was preparing to move in. They had minutes before being captured, or worse. David quickly uploaded the completed evidence package to multiple secure servers while Sarah gathered their essential materials. The cafe's back exit led to an alley that connected to the London Underground system, providing their best chance of escape. They slipped out through the rear door as armed men entered the cafe's front entrance. Sarah could hear orders being shouted and equipment being deployed as Sterling's team realized their targets had escaped. The hunt was now open and desperate. In the underground station, David made several encrypted phone calls while Sarah kept watch for pursuing agents. His contacts in the National Security Council had reviewed the preliminary evidence and were preparing emergency briefings for the Prime Minister and senior cabinet officials. "The wheels are in motion," David reported, "but Sterling still has allies in high places. We need to stay alive long enough for the proper authorities to act on our evidence." Their refuge was a safe house operated by David's department for protecting intelligence assets. The location was known only to a few trusted individuals and was equipped with advanced security systems. Sarah finally allowed herself to feel a moment of relief as they entered the secured facility. The safe house contained communication equipment that allowed them to monitor government and police channels. Sarah was shocked to learn that an official manhunt had been declared for her, with orders authorizing lethal force if she resisted arrest. Sterling had convinced his allies that she was a terrorist threat to national security. David worked frantically to coordinate with loyalist elements within the government while Sarah monitored news broadcasts. The story being fed to the media described a rogue police detective who had suffered a mental breakdown and was making wild accusations against respected government officials. The breakthrough came at dawn when David received confirmation that the Prime Minister had been briefed on Sterling's treason. Emergency sessions of the National Security Council and Cabinet were being convened to address the crisis. Most importantly, the king himself had been informed of the threat and was being moved to a secure location. However, Sterling's response was swift and desperate. News reports began describing a terrorist plot against the royal family, with Sterling positioned as a heroic defender who had uncovered the conspiracy. The media narrative suggested that rogue elements within law enforcement were working with foreign terrorists to destabilize the government. Sarah realized that Sterling was attempting a final, audacious move to seize control. By positioning himself as the defender against terrorism, He could justify extraordinary powers and eliminate his opposition while appearing to protect national security. The climax came when David received an urgent call from the Cabinet Office. Sterling had requested an emergency meeting with the king, claiming to have evidence of an imminent terrorist attack. If the meeting proceeded, Sterling would have direct access to the monarch and an opportunity to complete his original plan. "We have to stop that meeting," Sarah declared. "Sterling is planning to poison the king during their private conference. It will appear as though the stress of the terrorist threat caused a heart attack." David immediately contacted his superiors, but the response was disappointing. Sterling's position and reputation made it difficult to prevent the meeting without concrete evidence of an immediate threat. The accusations against him were still being investigated, and protocol demanded that the private secretary maintain access to the monarch. Sarah made a desperate decision. She would return to Buckingham Palace and personally warn the king, even if it meant her capture or death. The evidence they had gathered was crucial, but preventing Sterling's final move was more important than her own safety. David provided her with communication equipment and a direct line to National Security Council leadership. If she could expose Sterling's plan in real time, with official witnesses monitoring the situation, it might provide the evidence needed to stop him permanently. Sarah's return to the palace was even more dangerous than her previous infiltration. Security had been increased dramatically, and her photograph was being circulated to all personnel. However, her knowledge of the building and her desperation gave her advantages that Sterling's security measures couldn't anticipate. She reached the king's private study just as Sterling was being admitted for his emergency briefing. Through advanced listening equipment David had provided, she could monitor their conversation and transmit it directly to government security officials. Sterling's presentation to the king was masterfully deceptive. He described a terrorist plot involving foreign agents and corrupt police officers, positioning himself as the only person capable of protecting the monarchy. Most chillingly, he offered the king a glass of water from a bottle he had brought specifically for the meeting. Sarah activated her emergency communication link and broadcast Sterling's conversation to the National Security Council in real time. Government officials could hear Sterling attempting to convince the king to drink the poisoned water while describing fabricated terrorist threats. The king, however, proved more perceptive than Sterling had anticipated. Years of experience with government officials had given him the ability to detect deception and manipulation. He politely declined the water and began asking pointed questions about Sterling's evidence. Sterling's desperation became apparent as his story began to unravel under royal scrutiny. The king requested additional documentation and suggested involving other security officials, moves that would expose Sterling's lies and prevent him from completing his mission. In a final, desperate act, Sterling abandoned subtlety and attempted to force the king to drink the poisoned water. The struggle was brief but intense. With Sterling's superior physical strength overwhelming the elderly monarch, Sarah burst into the room at the critical moment, tackling Sterling and preventing him from completing his assault. The physical confrontation was violent and chaotic, with Sterling fighting desperately to escape while Sarah struggled to protect the king and maintain her communication link to government officials. Palace security guards arrived within minutes, but the damage to Sterling's conspiracy was already complete. Government officials had heard his attempted assault on the king, and his treasonous activities were now undeniable. The evidence Sarah and David had gathered provided context for his actions and revealed the full scope of his foreign intelligence operations. Sterling's arrest was swift and thorough. The poisoned water bottle provided additional physical evidence of his attempt to murder the king, and forensic analysis would later confirm it contained the same toxin used against Queen Camilla. Sarah's vindication came gradually as the truth about Sterling's conspiracy became public. The media narrative shifted from describing her as a terrorist to recognizing her as the detective who had saved the monarchy from a treasonous plot. Tony was released from custody and received medical treatment for injuries sustained. During his interrogation, Dr. Harper returned to London to testify about the medical evidence she had discovered. while Margaret Bowles provided additional documentation about Sterling's activities. The scope of the conspiracy shocked the public and led to comprehensive reviews of palace security procedures. The final resolution came months later when Sterling was convicted of treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy against the crown. His foreign contacts were exposed and expelled from Britain. While his domestic allies faced their own legal consequences, Sarah returned to her position with the Royal Protection Unit.